at the last straw before we're getting pushed out the door. I was like, hey, man, have you heard of Cannonball? He's like, yeah. I'm like, so would being the Cannonball record holder get me a lobster roll? He's like, are you kidding? Really? I was like,
You're like,
yes.
And I'm like, what are the odds of this guy even knowing? Like,
Right. Yeah. And it's like his partner had no clue.
Hey, so welcome back to another episode of In the Driver's Seat with ABS. Today we have the owner of Switch Cars and a Cannonball record holder in the studio with us. Not physically here, but we have him on video and everything's working, so we're really happy we got
Mike's
that.
hella official, so
Yeah, we have a
it's
new
real.
piece of
It feels
equipment.
really, really real.
Yeah, we got our headphones today, so
Yep.
we're good.
Yep.
Every episode we add one piece of equipment extra.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of wires around us, but we're all good. We're ready to go.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yeah,
thank you
sounds
for
like
joining
a
us.
Cannonball. Every Cannonball, we add one new toy.
Yeah. Next time we're gonna have thermal glasses, so we can do this in the dark and we can just see our guests right through the screen. It'll be brilliant. It'll be brilliant. It's great to have you, Doug. Thank you for taking the time for doing this.
Absolutely.
We met Doug last year through a mutual connection. Him and some buddies showed up at a Cars and Coffee. Showed him around, told him about what we do, and then Doug and crew joined us for MotorWeek last year. And you had a good time there, right, Doug?
We had a fantastic time, yeah. Yeah, we snuck into the Bank of America booth and stole some lobster rolls. Saw a marriage proposal happen. And, yeah, the media passes were awesome. We messed with everybody. We brought disposable 35mm cameras. It's where you wind them and you have to go get the film developed for those of you under 30.
Oh, man.
You got to go to CVS.
Yeah.
And you drop
It was
them off.
actually it was really hard to find a place to get the film developed. It's not like ubiquitous anymore. And so some of us played it up big time. You know, if there's a crowd around a car, we just like flash our media pass and be like, excuse me, media. And then click.
Oh my gosh! Well, it's funny you mentioned the marriage proposal. We posted on Instagram yesterday about that, and I had no idea it happened.
I had no idea it
we
happened.
didn't know
There's
it
so
happened
much
either.
going on. It's like, amongst everything,
Yeah.
someone got engaged. So that's nice.
Yeah.
It's a whole whirlwind of stuff. I remember being at the gathering, and we're wrapping up the day, and I'm chatting with Doug, and these women come over, and they're like, oh, we're looking for, there's this after party and we don't know what's going on. And Doug is standing there like, what is happening? I'm like, no, this is absolutely normal for MotorWeek. You just, anything goes. You don't know what's going on half the time, but it was fun.
I'm telling you, that's the way to get invited to a party. They just like showed up and we're like, oh yeah, we heard about this party tonight. What time does it start? And Ben and I are like, what party? And they're like, the party with this guy, that guy with the cars.
We're like, we have
and
no
they
idea
just
what you're talking about.
kept dropping enough random
The guy with the
things that
cars.
I think eventually they got invited to the whatever party that
Well,
I think we
they didn't
found out
know
who
existed.
it was.
Well, I don't know who they were talking about, but one of our favorite
I don't think
members.
they did either.
I don't think they did either. I think they were just trying to get into something. But one of our favorite members, Doug Cohen, who had a car at the Concours, had invited people over, and I basically called Doug. I said, Doug, these girls are looking for a party. And he's like, yeah, send them along. And I was like, okay, no problem. I don't know if they went or not, but it's just another crazy moment. But good to have you, Doug. I don't think we really chatted much since then, but good to see you again, sir.
This is great because I in my early days of YouTube would watch all the Cannonball runs and was obsessed with it. And Ben and I always talk about what we always when we go on long trips, we always talk about seriously how we're gonna do it.
Oh
And
yeah. We go back and forth
so
in an amateur manner about.
this is really cool for me, and I know for us to have you here and kind of get the inside scoop of what it's actually like. And I think most people don't realize what it actually entails. I think a lot of people when they who aren't in the automotive world or who aren't passionate about cars, even those who are passionate about cars don't know what it takes to run a Cannonball, but I think a lot of people think it's just getting in a car.
Cross-country race.
Yeah, cross-country race, getting in a car and being flat out, driving like a lunatic on the shoulder.
Well, it's highly calculated.
When it's really not.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's done in a very controlled manner. It's done in a way that
Sean is justifying the speeding right now.
Well, it is. I mean, in my opinion,
My
it's,
entire life is justifying speeding.
but it is. I
Ours
mean,
too,
I think
ours
people, don't realize you can do it in a controlled, safe-ish way, right? Or am
Yeah,
I crazy for saying
sure.
that?
Well, here's the thing. You're right that people don't realize what Cannonball is in a number of aspects. One, they think it's easier than it is. And you look on like TikTok or any social media where somebody has posted a video about the record, and people are like, yeah, so what? I did that with my family on the way to Florida. We average at 100. And they don't realize that like cruising around 100 isn't averaging 100. That's
Right.
averaging like
That's right.
70, maybe, depending on how many bathroom stops for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, they think it's, that we're this menace to society that's out there just causing havoc
Yeah.
in what they assume to be a neutral kind of benign, safe environment. And it's like, no, driving in general is not safe. There's
Right.
people out there with bald tires
Yep.
talking on their phones. There's, if you knew what semi-truck drivers, like what drugs they were on and how many are running over their hours and all these different things, like I get scared anytime I go on a trip because I know how dangerous driving on the highway is.
Right.
So in my opinion, what we're doing, contrary to the Karens who think that we're, the danger in a safe environment, we're actually the safety in a dangerous environment. And the most dangerous thing about a Cannonball is not us, it's the other people who might make some stupid mistake, aren't paying attention, cut us off because they're not using their mirrors, something like that.
Right. I compare the Cannonball to driving on the track, and it's funny because everyone wants to be a race car driver. Oh, I could do this. You just sit in a car. Race car drivers aren't athletes, whole thing. And it's easy until you're an hour in and you have another hour on your stint or whatever it is. Is there a point on the Cannonball where you are absolutely shot? Because it's not like you can just say, yeah, let's get out, take a break, let's stretch and take our time and then get back into it. It's almost like, in that sense, it is a race, but mentally
Right.
you must be shot at some point, right?
Yeah. Probably 2/3 of the way through is when it really sets in.
Yeah.
I mean, past like 20 hours, it gets really difficult. And it depends when you leave, because obviously driving at night is far more fatiguing than driving in the day. So if your 20 plus hour time, if that happens at night, then it's really, really hard. But our second run, we left at 6 p.m., so we basically finished in the daytime, and that made those last 5 to 7 hours far easier. But yeah, I mean, every time we do it, we get about halfway through, and we go, why the frick are we doing this? Like, I'm never doing this again. This is stupid.
Yeah.
And then we get to the finish, and we're exhausted, and we die, and 3 days later, we're like, all right, cool, what are we doing next time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know exactly how you feel in that aspect. I did the Mille Miglia 2 years ago, and by the end of each day, I mean, you're driving not as long as you guys, but sometimes 15, 16 hours. And by the end of it, when the nighttime comes in, it's like, I am so tired. I never want to get in this car ever again. And then the sun comes up in the morning and you're excited to keep driving kind of thing.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
That's got to be quite the experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's you really appreciate the comfort of a modern vehicle when you step in something that's either a pre-war or basically pre-1957, and you're not driving incredibly fast, but it's a lot of
It's grueling.
twists and turns. It's really hot. Like in Italy in the summer, well, the car is hot, no air conditioning, the sun is hot, and you're just like absolutely sweating. By the end of the day, it's like inside of that car smells really bad from all the sweating.
Can only imagine.
I mean, that's how we've done a couple vintage car Cannonball races, and it wouldn't be my choice ever. I'm a fan of you pick the best tool for the job, but that was my entry into Cannonball, was finding these groups that did these tribute races, and we'd have to prep a vintage car with certain budget restrictions or year restrictions, and they mostly ended up being reasonably fast, but terrible and miserable because they were loud. The AC never worked reliably. The heat might. they were uncomfortable, and we'd get there, and the first time we did it, the AC wasn't working, so we had to roll the windows down. But then one of the exhausts fell off, so it's basically like open headers. So we just have like crazy noise and road grime and dirt coming in the car for 20 hours.
Wow.
And I threw out almost all my clothes when I got to the Portofino because it was so disgusting. And I took probably a half-hour shower. I used every washcloth that was in there, turned them all brown. I mean, it was gross.
Sounds fun.
It's so nasty.
Why don't we talk?
I got a trophy.
Great success.
And a good meal.
High five.
So why don't we talk about your records, if you will? So you set the record in the Mercedes. What was it, 26 hours?
27 hours, 25 minutes in 2019.
And that was in a Mercedes
E63.
E63, which got rear-ended on a shoulder after the record, of course, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that was a record that seemed to be unbeatable at the time.
I never said it was, and I didn't think it was. A lot of people did because it took so long to beat the previous record. So Ed's record stood at 28 hours, 50 minutes, and it took 6 years for his record to fall. And we beat it by a healthy margin, and so a lot of people said this is unbeatable. Arnie and I both knew it was beatable because we knew the delays we had encountered. We knew kind of the weak points. So, not that we thought it would be beaten quickly, but, we knew there was time on the table.
Yep.
And then lo and behold, someone came pretty shortly thereafter and set a record-breaking time. Is that right?
Yeah. So I don't want to blame the pandemic, but it certainly created a unique opportunity. And a number of friends of ours went out on what I call the golden weekend. It was basically like the second or third weekend of the shutdown because people still didn't know what it meant and were too scared to go out. So like there was almost nobody on the roads. And then it kind of people gradually were like, okay, this ain't such a big deal. We're going to go drive. And, the stay-at-home orders don't really hold that much weight. But anyway, the first weekend of April, a number of guys did cross-country runs. And Arnie was scouting for some friends of ours and pulled over to film them going by and got rear-ended by a truck driver who fell asleep. What did we talk about earlier?
Yeah, go back to our story.
Yeah. And so that was really heartbreaking. And then like 12 hours later, we get word of a team that we didn't know about that went out and beat our record. So it was like a 1-2 punch of our car gets destroyed, our record gets broken. Because if the E63 didn't get crashed, we probably would have gone out 3 days later and just demolished the record. But then we had to build a car in a month.
Wow.
And by the time we built it, the traffic was kind of almost back to normal. Cops had heightened up their enforcement because everybody was speeding. So the game was different. I'm not going to say it was back to normal totally. Manhattan was still empty.
Yeah.
But it was different. And the Audi S6 that we built was not as good as the E63 by any stretch of the imagination. So even looking back, there's some time there because we said, if the car didn't get wrecked, what could we have done with the ultimate car at the ultimate time when the roads really truly were nearly empty?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Audi was not up to the Mercedes standard, and looking in from the outside, I could see that's possible. And I remember when you online are telling your story about the Audi, you mentioned there's a point where the car starts shaking and it's all over the road and you're going 60 miles an hour and you're like, this is it. I guess my question is, I've done a few cross-country trips, nothing like a Cannonball, but I went to school in Arizona, so I was back and forth in my BMW. There are so many variables that people don't take into consideration, like the truckers falling asleep. I almost got ran off the road by an 18-wheeler, just no blinker, just literally almost ran us off the road. Like for you on these trips, what is like the unspoken variable? I know you've talked about deer in the past. Like what comes to mind when you have to expect the unexpected.
There's so many. That's the tough thing about it, is it's like all of the planning goes into controlling the variables that you can control. And ironically, people don't think this. Law enforcement is one of the easiest variables to control.
Yep.
And it's things like traffic or a freak accident, or, I mean, one of my friends got stopped for half an hour because they were running a power line across the highway.
Wow.
And you can't plan for that. That's not scheduled on the DOT website or whatever. It's just like, oh, I happened to come when they were doing that. Deer, flat tire. There's so many things that can derail you, and not just any one big thing. It could be a series of small things, a little bit of traffic here, getting stuck behind a cop on the highway there, construction that you didn't foresee somewhere else. You can do your best to plan, but in 2,800 miles, I mean, I can't go to a trip, on a one-day trip, a family vacation without having some sort of delay or, an accident that slows us down. But you multiply that out with 2,800 miles, and there's just so many variables.
Yeah.
In going into that, what would you say the biggest tool you rely on is when you're on one of those trips? Because you obviously have things like Waze running, you have night vision goggles, you have everything.
Sean and I are taking serious mental notes right now. We're gonna go back and watch
what do you
this.
think is? And you have spotters. A lot of people don't realize that you have people who are ahead of you to make sure things are clear and fuel stops, etc. So what do you think the biggest tool for you is when you do these runs?
Well, a lot of people say I'm the biggest tool in a car.
Bank of America might agree.
Oh man, that's a story in and of itself. I got to tell you the whole story, but no, I think it's the team in the car, right? A good co-driver with the binoculars and one that knows what they're doing is the most important thing, because not only do they have to keep you safe when you're driving, they have to drive and be safe, right? Like, I am putting my life in their hands.
Yep.
And my driver's license. So that's the most important thing. We need all the other countermeasures. We need the scouts running ahead. We need a lot of things. Some of them are just toys, and they help a little bit. But, if I could have nothing else, I'd have a good co-driver with their binoculars that I can trust to keep us safe and keep us fast.
I thought it was interesting that when you set the record with Arnie, you didn't have a third person. Was there a reason for that, or was it just simply, were you trying to save weight, or?
We did actually. We didn't have a third driver, but both times we had a backseat spotter.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Who was running navigation and binoculars. Yeah.
Yep.
It was Berkeley Chadwick in the Mercedes, and then Donadel Dariush in the Audi.
Oh, okay. Must have got mixed up or something.
What's like the preparation process for the car? I know that you guys joke that the more screens in the car, the better, kind of thing.
The more legitimate the record is. Yeah. It's everything, right? I mean, it's the same as prepping for a race. It's excessive maintenance to make sure that anything that could break is fixed in advance. It's redundancy. It's checking everything. It's testing everything. The fuel system is the Achilles heel of nearly every Cannonball, because when you're pouring that much fuel in, you run into venting issues. When you're transferring fuel, any number of things can go wrong, because these aren't factory systems, and you're dealing with complex factory electronics that don't like to be, fueled on the fly. So testing that system and making sure that it's reliable is probably one of the most important things to prepare. Tires, just making sure the car is well sorted, testing it at speed, testing all the electronics. Arnie, I got to hand it to him. He is really, really good at preparing cars. It's it's fun for me to nerd out with the equipment, and I'm glad that I built a car, which was the Monte Carlo. The car itself kind of sucked, but I cut my teeth on preparing a car, sourcing the equipment, figuring out what I needed. But I did that once, and I'm glad to let Arnie handle that because he's got an incredible shop that is really good at preparing high-end cars. He's got a crack team there. And I mean, they go at it. It's a full-time job for a few guys for like a couple weeks.
Wow.
And I think the genius behind this build that you did was you made it look like a unmarked police car, right? You had an Audi S6 that looked like essentially a Ford. It had a Ford badge but said Audi. Whose idea was that, and how did that, when you were driving across the country? I know there was one point, I think it was like right before California, right? They said one of your friends called and said that there's a a unmarked car coming high speed, and you're like, it's me. It's not.
Yep.
Yeah. So whose idea was that, and how did that work out for you across the run?
Right. So both Arnie and I have had like unmarked cop cars just in our personal fleet in the past. So we both know that like that is a great disguise.
Yeah.
And I had always wanted to build a Chevy SS because I could make it look like, an Impala, or not an Impala, a Caprice police car. And that was like kind of, if I was building a car, that would be my ultimate. But Arnie is the master of disguise. There's a pun, I think, with the, Cannonball, the masquerade ball, because he's so good at, masking a car. But, he was the one that made the E63 look like the silver passenger car, which is the nickname it earned. And he was the one that like looked at the Audi and was like, hey, I think I can make this look like a Ford Taurus. So that was all him. I think I was like, hey, we should put reflective chevrons on the back and a unit number. And that was my input. Otherwise, it was all Arnie.
Yeah.
I find him fascinating. I've only met him one time, and it was I was volunteering at the Gold Rush Rally in 2018 when they came to Boston, and I was helping Protective Film Solutions put stickers on the cars, and it was like my first car experience. It was this whole big thing. And I remember he was putting all of this like electronic stuff on the front of his Mercedes, and I was like, hey, what is that? And he like took the time to sit down with me for probably 5-10 minutes and explain this really complex like laser jamming system that he had on the front of his car. And I thought that was the first time I ever heard of laser jammers.
I've never met Arnie, but you can just tell from the videos, like
awesome.
Looking at he's got this like glare in the videos, and it's like he just absolutely knows every detail about this stuff, and it's just like, that's the key.
Yeah. I mean, you were mentioning the preparation of the car, but like all of the technology that goes into the laser jammers and the radar detectors and all that. I mean, it's very, very impressive how you guys build all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it works.
Well, you also have to know how to use it, and that's key. Because there's a lot of people that have that stuff, but they don't understand kind of the nuances of it. It's not always just plug and play. There's a relationship that we have with the electronics. I mean, even like the CB radio, right? You talk about, or the scanner. You have to understand truckers' lingo and policemen's lingo to kind of understand what's going on, because it's a foreign language otherwise, and the electronics are the same thing. You have to use them enough to start to understand, such that you can even get a signal and be like, yeah, I think that's a false. Why? Well, I know the detector, I know the strategy of cops in this state or whatever, and that just comes with experience. But all of that is a factor.
So with that, did the unmarked police S6, how do you feel that worked out for you? Obviously, you set the record, but when you were driving, you probably had initial reactions of, wow, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we don't really know how well it worked, right? Because other than our friend thinking it was a cop car, did it actually deter people from calling us in? We don't know. Did it fool any actual cops? Probably not. But we don't know what we don't know. There's so much to Cannonball that you're like, we don't know what we almost missed or what almost could have happened, right? I know it backfired once, because in Colorado somebody called us in and they had us like totally made. They're like, yeah, when we heard over the scanner, there's a speeding Audi that's dressed up to look like a police car, and it's got antennas on it, and it's got unit number 024A on the back. And Arnie just glared at me because that was my idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the heck?
Oh man! Did
So,
people
but
pull out of your way if you're in the left lane? Like they saw you coming,
No.
would they move over? Oh yeah.
Not really. I mean, some, but people don't. Like, you
That's
watch
such
any
a thing.
police chase videos,
Yeah.
they'll come up behind with lights and sirens, and people
Yeah,
don't
people
even
are
move
just on
over.
their
Do you
People
wanna-
are so clueless.
Do you want to share just a PSA message to all left lane campers out there? 'Cause that's like my
They're
biggest.
not
Nice.
listening.
No,
They're
they're
not
not.
listening
Yep.
because
Yeah,
they're
that's
not
right.
car people.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Oh.
That's it. That's it.
Good point.
Switching gears a bit, still related, but switching gears. I think we come across kids all the time at the museum, like, oh, like, how do you get this job? Like, you work with cool cars. Like, it must be great. And you're in the car business. How much does networking, like, play into both the Cannonball and your career? Like, going out, meeting people, just having conversations? Because
Sure.
when I tell a kid, like, dude, you could do this, go to Cars and Coffee and talk with people. Like, that's really how it starts, at least for me. Like,
They
how
look
much
at you
does
like
it-
you have 3 heads, though.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But like how much does that mean to you, at least for putting together Cannonball, or at least in business?
Sure. Well, I think they're both the same, and they cross over. I use my business network to help us out with the scouts for Cannonball and the research, and vice versa. Doing the Cannonball has opened up doors for me that cross over into business opportunities. I've always been kind of old school. I think relationships are paramount. I'm not the guy who goes to networking events per se.
Yeah.
I don't like that kind of forced networking, but I'm the guy who takes 2-hour lunches and doesn't work a 40-hour week in the office, but I'm always going here, there, going to events, being with people, because that's important.
Yep.
Especially in this business, there's very little loyalty. So you have to be actively staying up on the customers you already have and staying in front of them, whether it's a call, text, whatever. And I'm not the best at it. I'm not going to say I'm
Yep.
fantastic at
Yep.
it, but that is, I think, more important than other things. Digital marketing is important. All the business fundamentals are important as well. But I think relationships are the most important thing into building your personal brand, enhancing your
Yep.
career opportunities.
Yep. Well, clearly, that seems to have taken you a long way. You've been a successful Cannonballer. You seem very successful with your switch cars business. You could almost say you're a modern Renaissance man, as you seem to. Well, you seem to talk your way into a security position recently. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
That was
For those who may not
the
know.
most fun. All right, so so Ben was gracious enough to get us media passes for the event. We used them well, and we were having fun at the event, but we were all a little bit hungry. And my wife texted me, and she's like, "Hey, we're over in this tent, and they've got free alcohol, and some snacks, so just come by." We're like, "Okay, cool. Are you supposed to be there?" And they're like, "We think so." I'm like, "All right, whatever." So we went over there and sat down, and we're going up to the bartender, getting drinks, and invite some of our other friends over, and they had just paid a fortune for drinks, and they're like, crap. So then the tray came out with like lobster rolls and a bunch of other awesome snacks. We're like, this is great. And didn't think much of it. And then the guys who were working the tent, the Bank of America reps, were like, "Hey, are you Bank of America private clients?" We're like, "No." They're like, "Well, you're not supposed to be here." Like, "Oh, okay. Well, we didn't know. We weren't trying to sneak in or anything. We were just here, and nobody told us we couldn't have free drinks." So we kept getting refills, and so they're like, "You guys can hang out, but you can't really eat the lobster rolls," which was like what we were there for. But
you got to picture this. So Doug, to the event, wore this great Cannonball jacket that looked super official with the patches and the
cool.
name
Right.
on it and everything, and he looked
Right,
official.
and-
So just picture that.
yeah, and despite what some critics may say, I do not use the Cannonball or clout or whatever to get me into things. I don't advertise it, right? And so this was a rare move for me, and we're like just about to get kicked out. I'm like, I hate being like not included in things or not welcome. So I'm just like, at the last straw before we're getting pushed out the door, I was like, hey man, have you heard of Cannonball? He's like, yeah. I'm like, so would being the Cannonball record holder get me a lobster roll? He's like, are you kidding? Really? I was like,
You're like,
yes.
And I'm like, what are the odds of this guy even knowing? Like,
Right. Yeah. And it's like his partner had no clue, not a car guy at all. He had to explain it, and he still was like not that interested. So we got to stay because of the Cannonball.
Amazing.
And so like we took pictures with him and did the whole thing, and we're just hanging out. And one of the guys was like running security in front of the tent, which he wasn't doing when we first
to
showed
prevent
up.
guys like you from eating
Yeah,
their lobster rolls.
Right. And I felt so bad for the guy because it's a terrible job to tell people you can't come in, especially when there's lobster rolls and free alcohol. And I just was like, hey, man, there might be a little bit better way to phrase it so you're not like, just to make it easier on you, because I can tell you like don't like telling people no, and this is a hard job. And so I guess he liked my suggestion enough that they're like, hey, we kind of want to walk around the show. Do you mind just like manning it for a little bit? I was like, the only thing I like better than breaking the rules is enforcing the rules. I'm like, I'm on it.
So now anyone who wants to finance a car through you goes through Bank of America.
Well, Bank of America is funny. Bank of America won't fund independent dealers, so we can't even do business with them. But yeah, so I stood out front for like half an hour just being like, are you on the list? Are you on the list? And just, stiff arming people away from the lobster rolls.
Yeah.
Including a couple of employees at Bank of America who were like, no, we're employees. We can come in. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm not. So how would I know?
Oh my gosh.
I have a question for you. So with your dealership, I feel like there is this household thing with a lot of people, maybe if they're not necessarily car people, that they're not trusting of used car salesmen. And I feel like people always give used car salesmen like a bad rep. How do you like get around that?
Yeah, it's true. 99% of used car salesmen give the rest a bad name.
Yep.
Alrighty then.
I'll give you a minute on that one.
Alrighty then.
Yeah. I think that's changing. Typically when I tell people what I do, if they're over 40, they're like, oh. If they're under 40, they're like, oh, cool. I'm like, cool. I'm a used car salesman. That isn't cool. It's never been cool.
Right.
But no, I think that stigma is certainly changing, especially with the internet kind of bringing a bit more transparency to the industry. I've just got around it by not being a used car salesman. Yeah. I'm not a very good salesman, in my opinion. I just have cars that I like. I think that's infectious with people, that I have a passion for cars, and that's shared. And I worked at a dealer for 5 months, and the reason I left was because I didn't like the games played there and the politics, and I wanted to make it simple and easy. So that's why I started the dealership a long time ago. It took me a long time to figure things out, how to do it. But yeah, I'm not actively trying to get around that stigma. I'm just trying to not hate myself.
Yeah.
And if I enjoy what I do, and I do it in a manner that's ethical and want to provide a pleasant experience for my customers, it's like the golden rule, right? If I was buying a car that was my dream car, how would I want the experience to go?
Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I want to provide that to my customers as well.
Yep. It's an easy mentality, I think. And since starting this podcast, one of my favorite aspects has quickly become all the commenters on the videos who like come in and like chirp my pants because they say they're skinny, but the reality is I just have skinny legs. And I know you have your wall of shame on your website, and I was curious how you keep mentally flat when dealing with people who aren't the most pleasant in the world, because I'm sure it's a consistent thing week after week.
I don't know that I do keep mentally flat. I've had some pretty smart-ass responses to customers. I've definitely fired a few, and in terms of like I would flunk sales school because you're supposed to respond politically to all of them, and switch them around, change their attitude, close them, whatever. I'm not the most PC guy in that respect. So I'll tell you what I think usually. And I think that's cathartic for me is having the freedom to do that. Whereas if I work for somebody else, I couldn't. But at the same time, I don't want to tick anyone off. And I know that oftentimes people don't necessarily, I guess they don't mean what they say. Right. So with the internet, you have a wall of anonymity, and people kind of feel that enables them to be more aggressive towards salesmen or say things that they wouldn't otherwise. Or even when you're emailing or texting, things come across without the emotion or without the intent. So I have to keep that in mind and say, like, OK, just I don't take anything personally. And that makes it a lot easier. To not get my panties in a wad about something somebody may say or an offer they make. If people lowball me, I'm just like, okay, cool. Not going to get the car. Yep. Doesn't offend me. Just you're not a buyer.
Yep.
My favorite thing was I worked at Tesla and I was in sales forever. And when we had an upset customer about whatever it was, it was always the same. Well, I'm going to tweet Elon, and Elon's going to take care of this because I'm going to tweet at him. And I'll just be like, okay, tweet at Elon, please, by all means. See what happens. It's just like, like you were saying, people are just like, they think in their mind that they.
It's funny. It's their world.
Go ahead and tweet, you twit.
Yep. Well, Doug, it was great having you today, sir. It was great to see you again. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And
absolutely,
it's good to hear that you'll be back for this year's MotorWeek because we actually wanted to extend an invitation to join us as a panelist on one of our seminars discussing transcontinental driving and cannonballs. Are you up for it?
I'm totally up for that. I love talking, so
I
can guarantee you half the questions will be, so what did you do about bathrooms?
I was gonna ask that, but I avoided asking
diapers,
that.
Bro, it's diapers. Oh my God.
It's a really, other people have way better answers. They've drilled holes in the floor. They have condom catheters.
Ugh.
We just, for us, it's about planning. So we moderate our intake such that we don't have excess. So it's like we go pee at our fuel stops, and that's just the fuel stop is planned out, and that's easiest for us. Every once in a great while, I'll pee in a bottle, but we don't have any fancy thing that's a cool answer. But everybody loves to know that.
Well, that's what the Himalayan salt is for, right?
You like sprinkle it in your water.
Yeah, it just drains
stays in your body.
Yeah.
No problem.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're really looking. I guarantee you that seminar will sell out. No problem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Really quick.
Yeah.
But we're really looking
people
forward.
love. I do that for car clubs around here, and man, they love it. The question, typically I'll talk for 20 minutes and the question and answers go for an hour.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, good deal, Doug. Good deal.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
looking forward to
Thank
seeing
you
you
for
in
all
the
of
fall, if not sooner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, make it to a
we
Cars
can't
and
wait.
Coffee, please.
We got 27 this
Yeah,
summer,
we do
so
have a
we're
lot
gonna-
of cars and coffees, so definitely come down. That'd be great.
Hey, we love New England, so I will do my best. Thank you for the invite.
The roads aren't as open, but we'll make it work.
All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks again.
All right, Doug.
All right, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, dude.
Have a good one.
Bye.